Welcome to class number 10. The Lord saw the wickedness of man was great on the earth, and every thought and intent of his heart was evil continually. The Lord was sorry that he had made man on the earth, and he was grieved in his heart. And the Lord said, I will blot out man whom I have created from the face of the land, from the animals and man and animals, to creeping things, birds of the sky, for I am sorry that I have made them. But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. Men became so evil that God determined wholesale judgment. This Ray Winkle that I mentioned earlier, in his conclusion of his book on the flood, he said the flood was a type of the end time judgment, where the evil was so great upon the earth that he wiped out the world. And as Peter said, we forget that he wiped out that world with water, and he's going to do it a second time with fire. That's very much of a paraphrase, but I don't have it written in front of me. So, but it's what it says, and he brings out, Ray Winkle, that it's a type. And we do well to take Peter's advice and see what kind of people we are with these things coming upon us. If he felt that way 2,000 years ago, how much closer are we to the end times today? So man became so evil that God determined to judge them. Now and again, God in the Bible, and we don't know, we can't judge if he's doing it to this day in different areas, when a nation is just wiped out or something, or peoples, or you know what I'm saying. Art Katz, a Jewish believer that we used to communicate with, he's gone to be with the Lord now, but he was a friend, and he believed that the Holocaust was the judgment of God for 2,000 years of rejecting Christ. And he's a Jew, he can say that, that's, but I certainly wouldn't say that, but God does do surgical removals sometimes. Now, the flood was more than a surgical removal. We think of Sodom and Gomorrah. They were so evil that God removed them from the face of the earth. Supernaturally, Canaan was so evil that God told Joshua, kill them all. Man, woman, child, even their livestock. Don't keep anything that is of Canaan. Of course, the Israelites never did that, and the Canaanites were a thorn in their side for the next hundreds of years. Babylon, when they attacked, God judged northern Israel and finally southern Israel, Judah. The first through Assyria, the second through Jerusalem, and Judah through Babylon, and did it again, wiped out the nations. And then finally wiped out Babylon after that through the Persians. And it happens, that's in the Bible. Like I said, it could be happening today. But we don't claim to have the word of the Lord like the Bible does. So we can't make those judgments. The severity of the flood by comparison to those other smaller surgical removals. And the thing of it is, that culture is such a cancer. I call it surgical removal. I think that's my own term. It's such a cancer to mankind that in order to save the body, he's got to remove that part. He's got to remove that part, the kind of idolatry. And I have a book that I bought probably about 10 years ago called A Dictionary of Demons and Deities of the Bible. It's so heavy, it's as heavy as a Strong's Concordance. It's got about 800 pages. And it cost me a little bit of money back in the day when I bought it. And but it was worth it. I thought somebody, and at this time we had a whole little Jesus People Fellowship going with the ex-pastors, and not the pastors. Anyway, the guys who had gone off from that church. And I said, one of us has to have this book. Anyway, and I've been reading that, and man, the idolatry that the Canaanites were in was just tremendously evil. And God said, wipe them out, Joshua, wipe them out. And then Israel turned to those same idols. And Baal, which was a nasty idol, and Ashtoreth or Ishtar, Astarte, Easter, call her what you like, that was a nasty cult, along with Baal and Ashtoreth and Bel and Ishtar, etc. And God said, I can't, this is worse than your average idolatry. And it's going to be a cancer that poisons the whole body if we don't remove it. Now the flood was super severe, but it's due to the greater revelation of early man. They communicated directly with God. The sons of God, the angels, apparently were with them too, or communicating with them. There wasn't such a sharp, and this I've read in some of the idolatrous beliefs, but it coincides with what the Bible says. A lot of that is very close to the Bible, but it's perverse. It's done in the name of many gods instead of one God, etc., and male and female gods, and all the things that we associate with mythology and idolatry. Anyway, but the ancient Babylonians and Assyrians and Canaanites believed that before the flood, and they all believe in a flood, by the way, well, they're all descended from the flood, aren't they? And so they all have a flood tradition. Native Americans have a flood tradition. Mexicans have before European conquest, have a flood tradition. And we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But their beliefs are that the gods, we call them angels, but that the gods were just, and men were just living together, and sometimes they mated, and that's what produced guys like Gilgamesh and such like. I was starting to describe him. He was 17 feet tall. He had a companion. He was so arrogant and nasty, he forced the people to build statues of him and to worship them. And they were happy to have a powerful king. I mean, you got a 17-foot tall king. That's not a bad deal. And maybe he was only 12 feet tall, or like Goliath, 9 feet tall. Who knows? But he was a giant. He was half. In fact, he was 2/3 God with a small g, angel, and 1/3 man. And anyway. And he and he was arrogant, he lost his temper, he took any woman he wanted, he was just a really nasty character. And so God gave him a companion that was this beautiful animal man. Yeah. Do we really want to get into his name, I believe was Enkidu. And he was there to keep Gilgamesh in line, to correct him and to say, knock it off, man. And he was just as big, just as nasty, only way more beautiful than Gilgamesh, who was the most handsome guy in the world, okay? And they became lovers. Hmm. So the whole thing is just so nasty. And so the kind of evil that was going on in those days, especially with the added element of the angels, fallen angels, living, dwelling among men, if not living there. God just said, forget it. And we don't know. The Bible doesn't tell us the whole story of those sons of God. But we do know that 1/3 of the angels fell with Lucifer in his rebellion. And so this might be those, and God cast them out of heaven, and they went to earth and tormented men until God killed the offspring in the flood along with everybody else, because everyone else was worshiping the same idols and worshiping their kings who were half angels, and et cetera, et cetera. So they had greater communion, greater responsibility, because the spirit world was wide open to them. Today we have to believe in God. And sometimes even if you're a believer, you have doubts and say, God, you haven't answered my prayer for a long time here. And the devil says, well, that's because there ain't a God. And shut up, devil, but we deal with that. They didn't deal with that. They talked to angels. They talked to God. Even Cain, he's in sin, and God comes and says, where's your brother, Cain? I don't know. Am I my brother's keeper? And so God said, greater revelation, greater privilege demands greater judgment. And because it's mentioned in the context with it, perhaps the involvement with the fallen angels were a major ingredient in the irredeemable situation. Okay, according to Ussher's timetable, he's the guy that in the 1800s put together all the genealogies and came up with the biblical timetable that's been followed ever since. There may be a few generations missing in some of the genealogies. They may sum it up sometimes. But if you follow the literal interpretation of the genealogies, the flood occurred 1,656 years after creation. The population of the earth at that time, if each couple had, now these people were living to be hundreds of years old, remember? And if each couple had just 6 kids, though they lived to be 800, just say they only had 6 kids, each family, the population would have been 7 billion 1,600 years later.
7 billion?
7 billion. When you do the math, amazing. We could be really conservative and say, well, what about 1.5, 2 billion? Or today it's 6 billion, right? And there's plenty of room still. It's crowded in a lot of places and empty in other places. And it was perfect climate in those days, so you could live anywhere. So maybe 7 billion isn't, maybe that's conservative when we only give them 6 kids each. They didn't count them, so we don't know. And as we've seen earlier, they weren't cavemen. In fact, a lot of those pagan things that I was telling you about, that I've been reading about in the Dictionary of Demons and Deities, pray for me that I, anyway, that I don't get oppressed from just reading about it, but they believed that the angels, the fallen angels, taught man different things, especially astrology, and because they wanted them to know about the universe and such like. And so, but you can see the Cretians, the ancient people way back in the days of the earliest days of, days of Abraham and such, had drainage systems, indoor plumbing, all sorts of things that we just wouldn't expect. Flush toilets. They have found flush toilets in these ancient ruins. There's not that many of these, but actually all over the Mideast, there's all sorts of digs and things that have happened and been dug up over the years. I have another book that's a picture book, and all the explanation go with it of all the different idols and the different angels and deities and how they were symbolized and all that kind of stuff. And it's just, this is really fascinating. And so there is some information about it. The ark itself indicates a good knowledge of engineering skills. There was no doubt primitive people then too. But as we said a week or two ago, we think of cavemen. No, those were burial places. And the art on the wall was not art to entertain them while they were sitting around the fire and wanting to go out and kill another mammoth. It was pictures of the dead people's lives and such like that were buried in that cave. They were too cold to live in, the ones that have been found. So they're believed today that they were tombs. Anyway, And like I said, there was probably some primitive people. There's primitive people today too, in New Guinea and different places. But they were not an uncivilized people. The flood is recorded in over 200 different traditions. The Bible records, is this in your notes?
Yes.
Number one, the Bible records Noah, his wife, 3 sons, 2 of each animal, and 7 of some of the clean animals for sacrifices. The ancient Babylonians, according to the Gilgamesh epic, describes a universal flood with animals saved on a boat, birds being sent out, landing on Ararat, offerings and sacrifices being made to Ishtar, who then gave them a rainbow. Wow. Ishtar was the female god of reproduction and everything. I always thought it's just the worst shame in the world that the resurrection of Jesus is now celebrated under the name of Ishtar. Of all of the devil's great victories in the church, that's got to be the biggest. Even bigger than naming Christmas after Kronos, Neptune, another one of not naming Christmas, but celebrating Christmas on the high holy day of Neptune. Anyway, not Neptune, excuse me,
Saturn.
Kronos, what?
Saturn.
Saturn, sorry. Saturn was the father of Zeus, Neptune, and Hades. And many other gods too. But those 3 were the fathers of many other, and they were the fathers, according to the mythology. Zeus and Neptune had a lot of human offspring. Like Zeus had a female, a human woman, and that's where Hercules came from. Anyway, that's mythology. But there's, like I said, there's fact behind these things. That kind of stuff did happen. Okay. Sumerian kings once had long reigns, then a flood came, and after that they had shorter reigns. The flood is the most documented event by extra-biblical sources in the Bible. I'm going to read a little bit what Ray Winkle said about that, and hopefully not be too redundant. There is among these 200 traditions, there is almost complete agreement among them on the 3 main features. Number 1, there is a universal destruction of the human race and all other living things by water. Number 2, an ark or boat is provided as the means of escape. And number 3, a seed of mankind is preserved to perpetuate the human race. The 4th, which occurs very frequently but not in everyone, is that the wickedness of man is given as the cause of the flood. According to a Mexican flood tradition, Coxcox, also known as Tesbe by other tribes, saved himself, his wife, his children, some animals, some grain, from a great flood by embarking in a boat or a raft. When the Great Spirit ordered the water to withdraw, Tesbe sent out from his ship a vulture. This bird feeds on carrion and did not return because of the great number of carcasses strewn all over the earth. Tesbe then sent out other birds, of which the hummingbird alone returned, bringing with it a branch covered with leaves. These were people that didn't read the Bible, folks. This is before Europeans came to Mexico. The natives of Alaska have the following flood traditions. Formerly, the father of the Indian tribe lived toward the rising sun. Having been warned in a dream that a deluge would desolate the earth, he built a raft on which he saved himself and his family and all the animals. He floated for several months on the water. The animals, who could then talk, That's an interesting development too. Could be. Complained and murmured against him. A new earth at length appeared. The animals lost the gift of speech as a punishment for their complaining. Don't murmur. The natives of Sudan called Lake Chad Bornu Bahar El Nu, the lake of Noah. And they believed that a flood submerging the whole earth had its origin in this lake. The Hottentots called the progenitors of their race No and Higno. And the natives of Greenland have a tradition according to which 10 generations of men had lived upon the earth when a universal flood came, and the earth capsized like a boat, and the whole human race was destroyed. Only one man saved himself. When he struck the earth with his rod, a woman was created for him, and from this the present human race has descended. It's really pretty interesting. You want to hear another one?
Yeah.
An early Welsh legend states that, I don't even know if this book is sold anymore. It's like before Cuba was communist, because he warns about communism is spreading even to India and Africa now. He doesn't mention North America. But an early Welsh legend states that the god of Lilian burst, An early Welsh legend states that the lake of Lilian burst, flooding all the land so that everyone was drowned except Dwifin and Dwifak. Interesting names. Who escaped with a pair of every kind of living thing. So the descendants of this couple restocked the world with animals derived from those they had saved. Manu, you recognize that one, Becky, whom the Hindus regard as the great progenitor of their race, was warned that the tradition goes, by a great fish that the earth was about to be engulfed by water. He was told to build a ship and to put into it all kinds of seeds, together with the 7 rishis, or holy beings. Manu is called Satya, that is, the righteous. It is said of Noah that he was righteous among his generation. And then to make this flood tradition still more remarkable, there is added the story as reported by Hugh Miller, the holy Satyavata, that's the 7, holy guys, having on one occasion drank mead, became senseless and lay asleep, naked, and Sharma, one of the 3 sons who had been born to him, finding him in that sad state, called on his 2 brothers to witness the shame of their father. And said to them, "What has now befallen? In what state is our sire?" But the 2 brothers were more dutiful than Sharma, and hid him with clothes, and recalled to his senses, and having recovered his intellect, perfectly knowing what had passed, the father cursed Sharma, saying, "Thou shalt be a servant of servants." This is Hinduism. In the ancient town of Apamea in Phrygia, that's again Eastern Mediterranean, there was a pillar on which was carved an ark, which according to the tradition had come to rest on that very spot. A coin was also found, on one side of which was represented an ark with the door wide open and a patriarchal figure receiving a returning bird into the ark. On the other side of the coin is shown a man and his wife leaving the ark. On the ark itself appears the name Noah. Phrygia is modern day Turkey, I believe, northern Turkey. So I mean, it's right by the Black Sea. And archaeologists, is that the right word, have said that there was a great flood and most of the people were settled around the Black Sea after it. But it wasn't a universal flood. It was just a big flood at one time when the Black Sea overflowed and the Mediterranean came flowing into the Black Sea and wiped out the civilizations, but they They rebuilt up again after the flood around that area, which is right where Ararat is too. Ararat is just south of the Black Sea. So it's pretty interesting. Verse 14, God tells Noah, make yourself an ark of gopher wood. Make rooms in the ark and cover it inside and outside with pitch. And this is how you shall make it. The length of the ark shall be 300 cubits, its width 50 cubits, and its height 30 cubits. You shall make a window for the ark, and you shall finish it to a cubit from above, and set the door of the ark in its side. You shall make it with the lower, second, and third decks. A cubit is 18 inches. So the ark was 150 by 25, 150 yards by 25 by 15 high. Or 1.5 million cubic feet. Which is the equivalent of 522 railroad livestock cars. I can't remember where I found this information, but it's pretty cool. Each railroad livestock car can hold 240 sheep.
Huh.
Most the animals in the world are smaller than a sheep. We think of the big ones because they're more notable. A boat this size is more than large enough for animals and food for them. All the animals today. There's less than 18,000 total species of mammal, bird, reptile, and amphibian. The fish and them can stay in the ocean. They didn't all die. Although a lot of them probably did with all the upheaval and everything that was going on in the ocean too. But so there's 18,000 total species of animals today. Let's say there was 18,000 extinct species. They've actually found, we mentioned in talking about dinosaurs, that anywhere between 25 and 800 dinosaurs have been theorized. Most people say it's less than 100, but there's all sorts of other animals too, and there's a lot of mammals that have disappeared as well. So say you have, let's go with the huge number, 18,000 present species, 18,000 more that died or that have become extinct along the way, which I said is way too many. Multiply that times 2 is 72,000 animals. Okay. Average animal is much smaller than a sheep, so less than 50% of the space was devoted to animals. The real question is, was it possible to build it in those days? And God didn't have any doubt that Noah could do it. And again, archaeology has shown that they were an advanced people. Let's turn to Genesis 7. Come into the ark. Verse 1, take 7 each of every clean animal, a male and his female, 2 each of the animals that are unclean, a male and his female. If you take 7 each of the clean animals, that's more than a male and his female. No one knew what he meant. Also 7 each of the birds of the air, male and female, to keep the species alive on the face of the earth. For after 7 more days I will cause it to rain on the earth 40 days and 40 nights, and I will destroy from the face of the earth all living things that I have made. Noah did according to all the Lord commanded him. Noah was 600 years old when the flood waters were on the earth. So Noah with his sons, his wife, his sons' wives, went into the ark because of the waters of the flood. Of clean animals, of animals that are unclean, of birds and everything that creeps on the earth, 2 by 2 they went into the ark to Noah, male and female, as God commanded Noah. And it came to pass after 7 days that the waters of the flood were on the earth. In the 600th year of Noah's life, in the 2nd month, the 17th day of the month. I love the Bible. Do you want to know when that happened? It's down. And in the prophets and stuff, in the 16th year of King Hezekiah, Isaiah said this, Anyway, on the 17th day of the month, on that day, all the fountains of the great deep were broken up, and the windows of heaven were opened, and the rain was on the earth 40 days and 40 nights. Okay, the foundations of the earth erupted. There's a lot of great volcanic activity today, and as well as heated waters underneath the earth. And there was more back then. And so God just caused all the fountains of the deep, all the water that, is a lot of it's still down there, but there was huge earthquakes, huge cataclysms, huge volcanoes, everything just burst up from the earth. There's geysers today, we see hints of that kind of thing to this day. And then the canopy, remember the canopy? Should I put up that picture? Does everybody remember it? That blue canopy of water around the whole earth. He broke the canopy, and all the water, and the Bible says in Genesis 1 that he divided the waters below, the oceans, with the waters above in the canopy. There was a lot of water up there. In a heavy mist or whatever it was in, God caused it to crash in upon the earth. It actually took 40 days for all of the canopy to rain down upon the land. And the waters prevailed, verse 24, on the earth 150 days. Today, if you melted the polar ice caps, the earth would once again be covered with water. I'm not sure if there'd be a couple of peaks in the Himalayas or whatever. I mean, they're 30,000 feet up, almost. I mean, Mount Everest is 27,000, I believe. It's interesting, I might have mentioned this last week, it seems to me I did, but Monterey, Jim Springer used to live in Monterey. It's a city with about 5 million people back then. It's probably twice as many today. And this was probably 2010 or something. And anyway, I was down there, and it's a city on a plain, but it's in the Rocky Mountain area, so it's a mountainous area. And we took a little trolley car up to the top of one of the mountains up there, and we went inside this huge cave. And all over the walls of this cave are shells, fossils of shells and sea life. This is like, wow. Scariest cable ride I ever took in my life. And you're in a third world country, and boy, I hope the cable don't break, man, or we're all dead. But I'm glad we went, because that was like, well, here's the flood, folks, right here in the Rocky Mountains. Shell fossils, seashells. Wow. Okay, so the waters prevailed on the earth 150 days, verse 24. From 150 days on, the waters began to recede. So 150 days, or for 150 days, the waters were receding after the flood. That's 5 months, basically. And probably that's about, when the floods have totally covered everything, that's probably when the Lord said, I'll take the earth and go, shh, Noah will never notice, it's all water. You'll have another big wave. And anyway, sometime during the flood, he tilted the earth on a 23.5-degree axis, which gradually caused the polar ice caps in 5 months' time, and the waters receded. So on the 7th month, the 17th day of the month, the ark rested on the mountains of Ararat. It's in the news again. People have seen it again. And the thing of it is, it's there. And some people say, well, we don't know if it was really there. Read the books, man. There's dozens of books about people who have seen the ark on Ararat. And then they go up there and it's not there. Well, depending on how tough of a winter is, the glaciers will cover it, or in a warm summer, they'll melt and you can see parts of the ark. People have been in there and saw cages and everything. It's really amazing. The ark exists. God kept it there. So doubters would have to look at it and really have to harden their hearts to say it didn't happen. And it's in the mountains. What's a huge boat doing up there anyway? Well, it's probably not really a boat. It's pretty much the dimensions of the ark and everything. Wow. Chapter 8, verse 14, we're just jumping a little bit here, running out of time already. And in the 2nd month, on the 27th day of the month, the earth was dried. And God spoke to Noah, saying, go out of the ark, you and your wife and your sons wives with you. Bring out with you every living thing of all flesh that is with you, birds and cattle and every creeping thing that creeps on the earth, so that they may abound on the earth and be fruitful and multiply on the earth. I didn't mention this because people have asked, how did they find every animal? The Bible says God brought them to him. Mm-hmm. God brought them to him. And again, it was a climate where all of the animals could have lived in the same neighborhood, for that matter. It was before the polar regions and the various climates separated species. They could have all been around in the Mideast, which who knows how big the Mideast was before, when you think about it. So he spent 1 year and 10 days in the ark. The land had been drying, vegetation was forming. I'm not going to go into the birds from a scientific point of view. That makes sense, though. Again, just like the Mexican tail, the vulture found something to eat, and the dove didn't, and the hummingbird didn't. Interesting. Chapter 8, verse 20, Noah built an altar to the Lord, and took of every clean animal and every clean bird and offered burnt offerings on the altar. And the Lord smelled a soothing aroma, and he said in his heart, I will never again curse the ground for man's sake. Although the imagination of man's heart is evil from his youth, nor will I again destroy every living thing as I have done. While the earth remains, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, winter and summer. This is the first mention of winter and summer in the Bible. And day and night shall not cease. You have a new climate complete with hot and cold seasons, winter and summer, and deserts, high mountains. They talk about the great division, I'm trying to remember what they call it, of the continents. And but that no doubt took place during flood, where the continents actually shifted and formed the huge mountains. There probably wasn't Himalaya mountains before the flood, but that was caused by the total shift of all the,
Earthquakes.
of everything going on. And continents were much bigger and they blammed into each other, or whatever happened, it's all conjecture. So you have a new climate, complete with all the seasons and deserts, mountains, snow, rainbows, tornadoes, rain and precipitation cycles. It's cooler, less than ideal like it was before. Not conducive to longevity. Dinosaurs eventually became extinct. Larger pterodactyls couldn't fly anymore. We looked at some of the reasons for that. Man is, as we see in the Bible too, in Genesis, doesn't live hundreds of years anymore. No doubt in many ways inferior to the pre-flood people. All life is smaller, inferior, less threatening, more under control. As we've mentioned also regarding dinosaurs and such, the real record shows devolution, not evolution. Life forms getting smaller, not evolving into something greater. 70% of the globe is still covered with water. Great valleys, glacial fields, everything all of the features of the earth today is a result of the flood and the tilt of the axis. If you don't remember science class, you notice that every globe is always tilted, right?
Right.
Because that's how the earth really is. I was thinking about that. Who determines this stuff? I mean, they've known it since biblical days that the earth, what causes seasons and things like that. It's amazing. I mean, maybe not biblical days, but for hundreds of years anyway. It's just, I was thinking about that. How do we know that the sun's getting less hot than it was before and this and that? But we looked at all of those measurable things today by scientists and found out that it's impossible for the earth to be more than 10,000 years old, essentially. And yet they insist it's millions of years. I was reading more in Science in the Bible by Henry Morris. By the way, I got his two biggest books confused. And he has a book called Evolutionary Science or something, whatever it is. It's the one I've been showing you and saying, this is a good book. This is actually the book. It's a different book. It's called Science in the Bible by Henry Morris. Anyway, from a geology, a lot of species became extinct. 400 species have been lost in the last 350 years. Dinosaurs lived for a few centuries after the flood, but not in great numbers. They didn't get as large. They had more difficulty finding food with a different climate. And again, there are evidences of a few species still isolated in a few pockets of the earth today. The flood from a geological perspective. I'm not going to have time to
Finish it.
really finish this, but
You can go
modern
10
geological formations could not have developed according to the traditional uniformitarian view. Uniformitarian is the way evolution is. The key to the past is the present. Everything we see was the same way in the past. So in order for a small river like the Colorado River to dig out the beautiful Grand Canyon, that would have had to take not thousands of years, but millions of years. okay? And the key to but then when you think of the flood, when everything is caused by a cataclysm, it makes total sense. To the point where now most scientists are in this field of not paleontology, geology and such, believe in a cataclysmic change, but many cataclysmic changes with millions of years in between them, in this neighborhood and that neighborhood, and over time it changed. Again, over millions of years, these things happen. They didn't happen that river could never have created that canyon, not even in the time we've given it. But a cataclysm could. And so there was a cataclysm. And then a few million years later, there was another cataclysm over in Asia. And they will not subscribe to a universal cataclysm that made it all at once, even though the evidence also points to a young Earth. As I read some of this stuff, it's just, they are so stubborn and foolish. It doesn't make sense. And they think we're foolish. They say, all those Christians, they just read, it's got to be the Word of God, and they're just ignoring the facts. No, they're ignoring the facts. Even just in our simple junior high level class here, we have demolished it. All the evidence is better interpreted by a universal flood. It's just as simple as that. And if you are interested in more, get Science in the Bible by Henry Morris.
Go see the Ark.
And go see the Ark. South of Cincinnati, about 35 miles. We've been there twice, Becky and I.